Hello, college community school teachers. It's great to be with you today, and thank you for watching this tutorial. Again, this is a read and write for Google tutorial on how we can use this tool embedded within our instruction, assessment, and curriculum. So today's outcomes for this screencast or tutorial are to connect read and write for Google to your classroom practice and align instructional strategies and read and write for Google to allow for accessibility. This is a key outcome for us in our ability to create equitable practices through a universal design lens and allowing for accessible instructional materials or accessible educational materials in our efforts to personalize learning for all students to ensure success for those students. So, with read and write for Google, we need to always ask the question, what am I trying to solve? So I need to harness my science teacher hat and I need to think about what I would do. So one thing that as a science teacher, these are four things that I always sometimes struggled with. Reading for an author's claim, evidence, and reasoning to answer a prompt. A website is distracting. I need to formally assess students' vocabulary usage while reading, and then reading closely to interact with one's own beliefs. So those are the four things during this tutorial that I am trying to solve. A lot of it has to do with reading a informational text very closely and being a critical thinker and thinking like a scientist as I read. So I will use strategies to help with that. So a little background. I have identified two standards that I'm going to be designing my lesson around because we do not want to just implement read and write for Google. We want to come back to the core idea or the foundational idea of lesson design, and we start with the end in mind, and that is our standards. So the standards that I have identified are high school Earth and Space Science Standard 3-1, and then our reading for science and technical information 11-12.1. I am focusing on science today, and the lessons that I will be designing around is about climate change and what we are doing as a community and how we can be critical thinkers around climate change. So let's dive in and get started. Thanks. All right, so let's dive in. Like I stated earlier, we always want to ensure that we have strong curriculum, instruction, and assessment design before implementing technology. And we do not want to use technology for technology's sake. So to kind of gain an idea of what we're going with here, we identified a standard, and that's to construct an explanation based on evidence for how the availability of natural resources, occurrences of natural hazards, and changes in climate have influenced human activity. And then if you didn't know this, but on the NGSS site, they also identify which language arts or literacy standards may align to that standard. And so I identified site-specific textual evidence to support analysis of science and technical texts. So one thing as a science teacher is I always found great informational texts that I wanted students to read, but I always struggled with how to get them to interact with that text and read critically and read for science purposes and then be able to talk about that. So my ultimate goal would be to use an article that students may start to gain background information so they can start to construct an explanation and then maybe have them answer a few questions. But I want them to be able to use an article that they have read. So I'm going to use read and write for Google to help students organize their thoughts as they read. So I found an article on New York Times. It is a series of 8 articles. This article is about resettling the first American climate refugees. So as you can see here, this is a website, and I have my read and write for Google Chrome extension open. The way I got that is by clicking the puzzle piece up here. Remember, you must be in Chrome and signed into your CR Prairie account to get this to pop up. So one thing that I would teach students to do is to use the highlight tool. So that is one tool that I'm going to use today, is the highlight tool. I would tell students that they are going to highlight and they are going to read this article for an author's claim, the author's evidence, and the author's reasoning. So I would assign each color a purpose. So for this sake of this video, blue is going to be the author's claim, pink is going to be the evidence, and yellow will be the reasoning. So I would have the students read this article and highlight based on those things. So for example, this might not be the author's claim, but what I would do is highlight a custodian at a sporting goods store on the mainland lives with his two sisters. So I want to highlight that. And if I believe that is the author's claim, I would highlight it first and then come up to the blue highlight tool and click it. And now that is highlighted blue. Let's say that I think the evidence is this sentence right here. So I'd highlight it again, or highlight it with my cursor again, and then click the pink highlight tool because that is evidence. And then let's say that I believe this is the reasoning. So again, I would highlight it, come up to the yellow highlighter tool, and click highlight. So it's all in good because the student has highlighted his or her thoughts. But really what we want to do is go to that site-specific textual evidence standard so that they can construct an explanation. So how do we get the text that is highlighted into a Google Doc? Well, that is a great question. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this button here where it says collect highlights. It looks like a recycle button. If we click on that, it will ask us which colors we want to highlight or which ones we want to collect. There's two ways you can do this. You can either do it by position or color. I'm going to do it by color because I want my evidence to be together and I want my reasoning to be together and my claims. So then when I collect the highlights, it takes a little bit and it moves it into a Google Doc. It gives the, it cites the web page for you, and it also gives you your email here. One thing I would highly recommend right away is to teach students to come up here and name the title, name the document, the title of your project. One thing you may have noticed is that this article has lots of stuff going around. It has other links to other coverage or other articles. It has lots of pictures. It has advertisements. And all this stuff can be very distracting for students as they read, especially if they have tracking issues with their eyes. One thing that you could do is click this button here, which is Screen Mask, and it allows the students to track, and it blurs out the other stuff or dims the other things around, but it allows the students to track with their eyes. Another tool you could use is the Simplify tool. I'm going to click Simplify Page. Here, it takes away some of the stuff. As you can see, it is not perfect, but it does take away a lot of the distracting aspects of it. You can hit this to even simplify it even more, which it does start to take away some of the point of the article. Another thing that you can do is you can change the contrast for students as well. So, in this portion of the lesson or the tutorial, I use the highlight tool to collect highlights so that I'm able to construct an explanation by using textual evidence. I assigned colors to each, or assigned specific things to each of the highlighting colors, and then I collected those highlights into a Google document. I also taught you how to simplify the page if a student is distracted by the ads and pictures, and how to use the screen mask so that students can track what they are reading. Thank you.